Hello and welcome to the Bookish Rambles podcast with me, Holly.
And me, Becky.
And today we are covering a book which, I'm going to just say it now, you're going to need to look up the trigger warnings for this book if you want to read it. It will be spoiler heavy, so some of the triggers will be made obvious in this book. I'll also do a little warning now that there will be mentions of like racism, very severe depression and suicidal everything, as well as probably some mentions of like women and misogyny and like generally health stuff from like the 50s. So but it's one of my favorite books. It's joint first of all time. I read it for the first time when I was, I think, 17, and it just I've read it like, I think my most times that I read it in 1 year was 3.
See, obviously I only read it for this podcast. I have always wanted to read it, so this was just kind of an excuse to read it. But yeah, the stark difference of, you loving this book, and I'm just like, I don't know how to rate it, but because of the background with it, it's kind of hard to put it into like a box with like that 5-star rating. So I don't know whether I'll really truly ever rate it like I would if I had read a proper piece of literature. I think just because of the situation with it and it being autobiographical, I don't think it can be something that's rated for me. And then obviously with the framing of the time, and just like, I do like her poetry. I have always liked Sylvia Plath's poetry. So I will say the book is incredibly well written. It's really refreshing to read, honestly.
It is, I think,
compared to the book I'm reading now.
I think one of the things that I will say is that it's one of those books that's really simple for a classic. And again, we've said this like a million times, simple is not an insult.
No.
I think it's got that very modern style of being easy to digest, and I think because of like the severity of the topics that are in it, it's really nice to have it be so presentable, because you don't want to feel like you're in this melodramatic person's head bogged down by all these heavy thoughts. You want to be able to sort of make your own thoughts about them, and I do think that it gives you the room to make those assumptions.
Yeah. Especially as we will go into this, like, obviously in a bit. Like, I liked, the first part of the book, I think you can kind of split the book into 2 parts. Yeah. Part 1 is where she seems quite young and naive. I mean, she's still young. Like, Sylvia Plath passed away at the age of 30.
She was never
when you think
mature, really.
Yeah. No, when you think that's 2 years away from me, well, less than a year, well, just over a year away from me, and I find that crazy to think about. Yeah. And yes, her work reflects the attitudes at the time. I think I saw a review where someone was like, this is terrible. I'm like, you've kind of got to have a critical lens with it because of the context of the time. This was just a normal attitude. Yes, I will say there is a lot of racism in this book, but
it's that
not everybody.
Well.
Yes, people were like that. People are still like that, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be like that. I just want to disclaim that it should not be like that. And obviously, there were people at the time that weren't like that, but I think the vast majority of people were like that. And you can see that Sylvia Plath herself just thought it was normal.
It's like the Huckleberry Finn
thing, it was just
thing,
a normal
right?
thing.
Where people were like, oh, Huckleberry Finn's racist. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously by today's standards, that is racist. But
like, literature reflects the period of time it's set in.
Yeah, and like, Sylvia Plath, the thing I always say is that she's literally dead. Like, she is not earning money from you buying this book. So unless you're like triggered by racism, which is completely valid, you should be able to accept that it is a piece of literature in which the racism, it's not part of its value, so to speak, but it's part of like the context of when it was set and when it was written, and of the person who wrote it and like the worldview that she held. And I think that there's always something to be said, especially in a book that deals so heavily with themes of feminism and mental health at a time when it was revolutionary. Like, there wasn't any books really being so open about women's health in this sort of time period. Like, there were obviously some books, but this one was pretty graphic, and it being based off of her actual experiences makes it more powerful. And to say that it is bad because of the racism, I think it's important to sometimes see that, like, it's interesting that a person can be, you know, favourable of women's place in society and basically advocating for better healthcare and stuff, and to expose the bad parts of the things that she's experienced, whilst also having what we would by modern standards call a sort of hypocrisy by being racist towards other people who aren't like herself, because she experienced discrimination and, you know, the health gender bias, but she herself is perpetuating it when it comes to other versions of discrimination. Like, I think that's really important. It's not something that makes me like it less, even though it is absolutely awful to read, because I think that it's important to have that in your mind when you're reading a book, and especially like with the progression. I just think it's so important that you don't try and pretend that it's not there, but you also don't immediately shut it down, especially because, again, she's dead. She's not getting money from this. She literally, like, isn't benefiting in any way. I don't know if her family do. I assume that her kids probably are the ones who get her royalties and stuff now. But even then, I think it's coming out of the public domain soon. So, not out of the public domain, into the public, other way.
Yeah, I know. It's, like I say, it's the second half of the book is probably like where I don't want to use the word shines, because this is not
Really
a book that
cryptic.
in any way, shape or form shines. But I think just a look into the inner workings of how mental health was viewed at the time of the 60s, which I think is what's so important about this book.
Yeah.
Especially like with the lobotomies, like I've never been able to really understand like people when people have lobotomies. It's always been like kind of what's
It's
the
like
word
a
I'm
horror
looking
thing,
for?
isn't it?
Yeah, but then there's a character that seems perfectly like she's just like I'm fine, like she's talking, and it's like I didn't know it did that. Like I've never really understood the whole thing of it.
Do you know what I'll say? I looked it up. Electroshock therapy is actually legal in some states in America.
Still,
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me.
But I think there's this thing, right, of like a lobotomy was never guaranteed to work because it was very risky. But there is a chance that it would, kind of like how you can change your brain chemistry and you get a different personality. It's not that it worked, but I actually plan on writing a Substack about this. I've been neglecting my Substack, but I want to write about like the history of like lobotomies, and specifically with like mental health treatments for women that were in a lot of places now they're illegal because they are deemed to be sort of like mutilation and, you know, inhumane, but that in some people did seem to work, because I think it's really interesting to consider that. And especially like in this case, obviously she gets electroshock therapy and it works. And it like is the whole thing is that the bell jar comes from the bell jar being lifted after a successful first shock therapy section, where she feels for the first time like she can feel the world around her again, and like she's actually a part of life again. So it,
But then like the continuation, they start to get scared of it.
yeah, it's really interesting to me the way that it's portrayed, because it does kind of give like an opposite perspective of like the way in which we see these things as like barbaric practices, whereas she went through that and she had what appears to be not entirely negative of an opinion of it. It's just, I think it's so interesting, like especially because as well, this is the thing that I liked about it when I was 17. At that point, I had never read anything that I felt like described how I felt when I was depressed. And then I read this book, and I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought I was going to hate it. I bought it literally because I was at the airport. There was a book that I really wanted, which actually I would say is like a modern day version of The Bell Jar. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. That, to my knowledge, is just pure fiction, but it deals with very similar, like a depressed woman who has experienced like abuse and stuff. And that book, it was in like a 2-for-1 or buy one get one half price offer, so I was like, well, I might as well buy a different book. And the only book that I had any interest in at all from a literary perspective was The Bell Jar, because I was like, well, I've been told that you should read this at least once by like a million different people. So I bought it and I read it, and I was just like, oh my god. This is,
I feel a bit seen.
yeah, it like so many lines in it. It's like, it's a book, this is going to sound so weird. I read this book when my cat died, and I was like, I finished it the day before I went to school. Like, I read it the day before we went back to school after the break, because he died on like the last day of school before the break started. And then I was like, I need to feel a little bit less awful. So I read this book. I stayed up till like 1 a.m. finishing it, and I just, it was like, I feel like I've been reset every time I read it. It's kind of it's like the book that fixes me when I need it, because it just, as somebody who has been depressed, obviously it's a very individual experience. It felt very like, you can tell that she had depression and that those thoughts and stuff were genuine, because it is a very authentic experience. And I think that the sort of detachment that she feels throughout the book, and the way that it eventually is revealed that this is like, the bell jar is like suffocating her, and that is like a metaphor for her depression. I just think it's like brilliant in that way. And it was like the first book that I ever read that made me feel that way. And rather than it just being like a thing for fun, it became like, oh, I can read books that actually make me feel like I'm more human. Because it is a very isolating experience. And I think, especially with treatment, I've never had shock therapy, obviously. And I've never had anything particularly bad happen, but I've had experiences with like therapy and stuff where I've not been super happy. I've had medication that I've tried that's made me feel even worse. I think it's just one of those things where reading a book where it doesn't glamorize getting help, but it also does show that there is a benefit to it, is really nice, because it isn't such a straight path, and it is very common, especially with like depression, that people will isolate themselves and say that they don't need help and be afraid of who they are when they've gotten help. And reading the way that she wrote about it from, it was like 70 years ago, right? It's kind of crazy to me. It's one of those books where it's like, you read it and it's just like the human nature that we are aware of right now is the same that was there 70 years ago. Like, the human experience has been shared across centuries, and this book is one of those things that shows that that's true. And it just, I don't know, a little weirdy, but basically I just think it's really fun to read books that feel very true today as much as they were at the time.
Yeah, see, I was just thinking, like, like how sort of like the bell jar, Looking for Alaska was the same book for me when I was 17.
I've never read that, but I've heard that it's like one of the best of his.
Yeah, I mean, it deals a lot with like grief and growing up and not fitting in. I mean, it's been a while since I read it, but I don't think I would feel the same. I'm kind of scared to reread it because I feel like I'll lose that.
Your memories.
Yeah, so I don't think I'll ever reread it, but it's something that I just will always have fond memories of, because it just really, I felt seen, I guess, with just trying to like fit in and not being seen. I mean, when a book does that, that's when you know you really love a book.
Yeah, I think that's like the best thing that can happen when you're reading, is that you take something away from it on like a personal level, rather than just like, oh, this was a good book. It's like, I actually put
it made me feel things.
Yes, I put it into my my personal statement when I applied to uni, that the bell jar made me realise that literature could have a real like actual impact on people's lives beyond just being entertainment. And that, when I read it, it was like everything that I wanted to create in my life, that I wanted to explore that sort of feeling in a very in-depth way. Like, I didn't just want to write about books because I liked them anymore. I wanted to explore them in that sort of point of view, and I think that when you look at the way that I've written since reading that book, my essays focus on like Marxism and feminism, and on the idea of, these issues which are really important to me as like a woman who grew up working class and who is still working class, but hopes one day to have a nicer life than the government and the economy are wanting me to have. I think that, it makes sense that I would read a book like The Grapes of Wrath and I would feel angry at the way in which the working classes are still being beaten into submission by capitalists and by people in pursuit of money for themselves in the way that they were in that book, which was written, I don't want to say almost 100 years ago, but it was almost 100 years ago. Like, we're talking about books like this, which were written in the 20th century, which are very obviously, like, when you read them, it's impossible not to see that, like, capitalism is bad and it makes people violent because it makes them have no other option than to be violent, and then it punishes them for that violence. And even if they're the ones reciprocate, like, they might be the ones who make not the first move but a response, right? And they still get punished. It's like the Black Lives Matter thing. White people were the ones primarily being destructive during the riots and stuff. And yet people turn that into an excuse to say that black people and the Black Lives Matter protests were all violent. And it's like, no, those protests were a peaceful response to violence, systematic violence, mind you. And yet they were punished for it further and hated more than ever. I say more than ever, not more than ever, but like in modern society. And I just think it's one of those things where it's really depressing. Like, I read The Fire Next Time at the start of this year by James Baldwin. He wrote it about the Black Civil Rights Movement in America. It feels super relevant now. And it's like, it's really depressing, but I think it's important because it has been noted that the rise in fascism comes when literacy rates are lower, when people have less ability to understand things. And we've spoken about this before, right? Literacy isn't just the ability to understand what a word is on the page. It's the ability to understand the meaning, even if it's like subtext. It's the ability to analyze what's going on and to think about it critically and to do an actually good job of that. That's what literacy is. And I feel like we do that on this podcast, not in like the most, we don't speak in like essays, I don't think, but
No.
you know, we speak about like books and we go beyond just the, oh, we liked it. We talk about why, we think about why, we have criticisms about the books that we like. Case in point, us talking about the racism of the bell jar and stuff. And I think that is literacy, and it's what people are lacking, and that's why people believe fake news. It's why they believe news sites that are unreliable. It's why they believe everything that they hear, even if it's just like literally so unfounded that it's insane. It's why they choose to remain ignorant because they think that it's like stupid to read books and stuff. And that's the kind of thing that keeps these cycles happening. This racism, the violence against the working classes, the repression of these social groups that's been going on for centuries. And reading books about it, reading books that go back decades, centuries, that go back to like, you know, before books were actually a thing that got printed. It's really interesting and important. And The Bell Jar was the first book that made me realize exactly how passionate I was about that topic, because I think until then, I had only been reading for fun. And until that moment, I had never felt quite so seen by a book. And it's when I started to diversify my reading. I think like that year was the same year where I read To Kill a Mockingbird, which is obviously a lot about race. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is great if you read it on its own. It's not so great if you read the sequel.
Just read the first book.
Yeah. I also read books about, I read The Giver of Stars that year, I'm pretty sure. So it was a book about women in a past time, spreading literacy by making a traveling library for people. Like, I read so many books that year, especially. I think I read Caging Skies that year, which is the Jojo Rabbit book. That was when I started to really challenge myself and to like be not just somebody who loved English as a subject, but somebody who like really breathed it, you know? And I don't know, I just think that like one book kind of kick-started that, and I appreciate that. I appreciate what it stands for to me. I feel like that maybe should have been my closing statement.
To be fair, like, again, like with this book, I think it's not something that I think I would read again personally. I think I've read it.
Yeah.
I can say I have now gone and read it, because for someone who does read a lot, there are a lot of classics that I haven't read. Like, I've never read any Jane Austen. I've only read the first part of Les Miserables. I've never read the Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I would have loved that book. I think I read Frankenstein a long time ago, but I think I need to reread it. I need to make my way through the classics. I know not a lot of people, but then you have people who are like, I don't read classics, when it's like, you should at least try one to see whether you'll like it or not.
Yeah. I think with classics, yes, some of them can seem really intimidating, but classics are classics specifically because they are like the books that have created the foundation upon which the books that now exist, you know, they're on that foundation. They've been built upon it. That is like why they're classics. You know, a classic might be a classic because it was written by an author who's very famous and therefore it automatically gets classic status, even if it's kind of terrible. I accept that. But I think that like Jane Austen, they're like romances, basically. If you like romances, you have people like Jane Austen to thank for making it possible for women to write in general. Obviously, did Jane Austen use, because I know like for example George Eliot and the Brontes, they used,
I think she did. I don't know.
But they still, even like ignoring the fact that they had, you know, pen names, they had nom de plumes that they had to use because women weren't allowed to write books. They still did it. They are now credited with that, and they have been given, you know, the sort of respect that they deserved. And Jane Austen's romance, you know, was she?
Yeah, so she didn't use a specific male or secret pen name, but she published her novels anonymously.
Okay.
So technically that's the same thing, really.
Yeah, but like even that, like, she paved the way for women's books to be taken seriously because her books were loved. And as a result of them being loved, people finding out that they were written by a woman meant that women were able to be taken more seriously in the publishing industry. It meant that romance books in general were able to evolve into what romance books are today. So if you like romance, you have people like Jane Austen to thank. If you like dystopians, you have people like George Orwell. You have, you know, if you love science fiction or fantasy, you have people like Mary Shelley. You have people like C.S. Lewis, Ursula K. Le Guin. You know, these people who, in many cases before your lifetime, wrote novels. I will say this, Alexander Dumas, he wrote funny books. I don't care how seriously people take The Three Musketeers. I don't care how seriously people take The Count of Monte Cristo. They are supposed to be funny. They are enjoyable. They're not that difficult to read at all. There were moments where I laughed out loud at the stuff in those books. They're just great. And if you read a book now that's like a sort of pretty wide scope but isn't super serious, he's one of the people that you have to thank. If you like the musical of Les Mis, you have to thank Victor Hugo. You know, like The Phantom of the Opera was originally a book, then it got turned into a film, and then Andrew Lloyd Webber turned it into a musical. It, like, all of these things in pop culture, they have a basis in classic literature, basically. Even films, you know, films didn't used to have audio, so you would have to read on the screen, you'd have to have subtitles. I feel like there is a level of storytelling in classic literature that people, it's like, oh my god, it's like that thing from The Devil Wears Prada where she's like, you think that you're abstaining from fashion by buying that jumper, when in reality it was chosen for you by the people in this room, because it filters down, right? And in literature it's not quite like that. It doesn't filter down necessarily, but it does. Writers who make really popular romance books, they create the tropes that get abused to the death by the writers who produce very quickly published romance novels. People who wrote classics are now responsible for the genres existing that exist. They're responsible for certain ideas. It's like Shakespeare. Shakespeare created the idea of the green-eyed monster as being jealousy. And now when you say things like green with envy, it's because of people like Shakespeare. And it like, you know, the doomed lovers, the star-crossed lovers thing, that's Romeo and Juliet. Like, you can say that you don't like classics, but I think that it's really foolish to turn your nose up at them. And I think that if you don't like classics, it's not because you've read classics and hated all of them. It's because you've not read a classic that was good for you specifically. Because I don't like Jane Austen.
It depends on the... Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the language. I mean, I can't say, I haven't read it yet, so I can't say.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the language because, like, I mean, trashy romance books have always existed. Like, I was just while you were talking about like the romance books with like Jane Austen, when like women first started to read, it was seen as scandalous And oh
Yeah.
my goodness, how could these women have thoughts? And it's just, I find it really interesting. I just want to say that people reading romance books, like with the smut, I find it's kind of the same attitude.
Yeah.
Like it's not harming anyone. Yes, but I think now it's more affecting publishing, I guess. But I just think it's just an interesting. It's always been there. It's just the same attitude. I just thought that was an interesting topic. But then I was just thinking, you have penny dreadfuls in the 19th century.
Yeah.
They were like they were basically trashy horror novels. So like the idea of the trashy horror novel and the trashy romance novel, well, the trashy novel itself has always existed. But and I think and that's what starts to become like classics. I think people lose. Is it Jekyll and Hyde as
Yeah.
a penny dreadful? Yes, it was first issued as penny dreadful. That's what I mean. These things that are regarded as classics, they had their startings in. I keep using the word trashy, but I feel like that's a good
It's popular
description.
fiction, basically.
Yeah.
They become classics because they were popular, and they were popular mostly for a reason. I mean,
Yeah.
a classic I always recommend, especially for beginners, is Animal Farm because of how short and easy to read it is. It's got a very digestible style, and it's something that is very applicable today. It's got the very Orwellian themes of like the people who control the media are the people who control the people.
Mm.
But it's also like it's 100 pages. It's literally not that long. It has, I think, maybe 10 chapters, and it's really interesting and it's fun. And I think that it's one of those classics where, like the Bell Jar, I think the Bell Jar, obviously there's a lot of heavy stuff in it. Like obviously if I'm depressed, but I don't get triggered by suicidal thoughts and stuff in writing. I just don't. The one book that made me feel physically ill was Earthlings, and it's specifically the child abuse in that makes me really uncomfortable. Like those scenes make me feel ill. But the rest of it, like I'm able to handle it, and so I really enjoy it. But if you are capable of like withstanding like the casual racism and the way in which all of this sort of stuff is portrayed, it's a really easy book to read. Like my mum started reading it because it was my favourite book, and she was like, well, I want to see what your favourite book is like. And she's not a huge classics reader, and she's really glad because she was like, I'm so glad that you're reading like your type of classics and stuff that you like is the stuff that I don't find too difficult to read, because she likes to be able to talk to me about stuff that I care about, you know. And I think Animal Farm, The Bell Jar, I would recommend Chess, the book. It's I think technically a novella, The Yellow Wallpaper, and a classic detective story that I read recently actually that I really enjoyed was The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. That has very casual racism again. It was written in like the 30s, I think like 1938 or something. It was like right before the Second World War. But I really enjoyed it. It was like, it didn't linger too long. And so I think the reason why I'm recommending these is because if you are afraid of classics because of the floral language and all that sort of stuff, these are all ones that have very simple, very modern language in the way that like their style is the reason why contemporary literature is the way that it is, because people have been influenced by the writing that came before them, which is those classics. It's those older but not too old classics where the writing was very fresh and modern, and especially for like a detective story, it did not linger at all on stuff that wasn't important. It was kind of like to the point, and I really liked that, you know. And I think that just in general, those books, like they're ones that I would say are like really easy for classics. And I just think there are a lot of people who get really intimidated by classics. You don't need to be intimidated. You just need to know what to look for, basically.
Exactly.
Should we talk about the book?
Yes, we probably should.
I just like realised that we've kind of whatever. Okay, so I've said what I like about it. Shall we talk about, I feel like a really important scene that isn't necessarily like related to mental health so much is, well, it's not just one scene actually, it's more like a recurring thing. Because, okay, I know that you didn't like so much the discussions of her going on like dates with Buddy Willard.
Yeah, I was just like, this is the same thing. Yeah.
The reason why I quite like those scenes is because I think she has this sort of path through the book where, aside from her mental health, she's also coming to terms with the fact that there's a double standard for men and women. and that, you know, she goes on dates with this guy and she feels really blessed, but then she finds out that, like, he has slept with somebody else, but if she had slept with somebody else, he wouldn't be okay with it, and neither would society. Because it's fine for him to do that because he's a man, but it's not okay for her to do it. And how he constantly talks about things as if he knows better, but he doesn't. And he's just kind of like a man who has like more audacity than he deserves, really. And then the scene, she goes and she has sex, very casual. And she ends up in the hospital because she has a very rare thing where she just gets like injured inside. And then she bills the guy. She's like, hey, there's a bill at the hospital, go pick it up. And I just think the reason why I liked the sort of collection of scenes is because we see her watching other women go out with men. We see her relationships with this one man who's been in her life a long time, who she's like kind of expected to marry. And then we see her reclaiming herself by having sex, because that's like something that women aren't supposed to do. And it's like, I don't know, I just think that there's I kind of liked that. I liked the way that she comes to also kind of accept that these other women that she's seen as not necessarily that good aren't actually that bad. Like, she kind of changes her mind on some people. And I just found her relationship with women and like femininity to be interesting, given the time period specifically. Like, as someone who has been through a lot of therapy and like medication and all that sort of stuff, it feels very interesting when I read like a book like this to consider how my journey would have looked 50 years ago, give or take. Because it just, I don't know, I think those experiences of her like womanhood there's something that stood out to me, I suppose, besides the, you know, obvious.
Yeah, I think I guess it was just that part of the book. Again, it's just, I can't really, my thoughts are still a bit like mixed with it. It's just, I mean, yeah, I did listen to the audiobook because when I'm doing stuff like this, it's a bit more digestible for me, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm traveling constantly, so it's like I can get this done while I'm traveling. And the narrator, I don't know if she was trying like to imitate her Sylvia Plath's voice. Yeah, and she was pronouncing things a little bit weirdly. I was like, is this the accent she had or something?
She was from Boston, you know? I think. Let me look that up, but I'm pretty sure that she is literally from like Boston.
Yeah, pretty sure she is, because but it was very theatrical. It had music and everything. I was like, yeah, oh, this is interesting.
She's a Scorpio. She was born in October of 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts, and then she died in England, and of course she's buried in Leeds, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that. She narrated by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Who's Maggie Gyllenhaal? That's who narrated it.
Shut up. No.
Yeah.
That's Jake Gyllenhaal's sister, the actress, who I don't know what you would know her from, because the first role that comes to my head is always...
She's from the she's from the she was in Nanny McPhee.
Yeah.
Wait,
she's the mother in Nanny McPhee in The Big Bang. Oh,
I know her face.
She's the woman in the Batman books. What's her name? The woman that Bruce is
in The Dark Knight. I know. I can't remember. She's been in quite a lot.
Rachel.
The only thing I would know.
House. Interesting.
Was she the Monster House?
She's like babysitter.
She's a babysitter.
That's so bizarre. I don't
know why she
an audiobook.
Okay, that's so random.
I don't know. I think maybe she was instructed. Maybe it was like it's supposed to be a theatrical one or something.
Why is she in a film called World Trade Center?
Oh, that's with Nick Cage.
Yeah. Oh, I did not know. I've never seen this film in my life. I did not know that they made a film about 9/11.
Oh, that's multiple.
Oh, yeah. I figured there'd be films, but I did not know that Nicolas Cage was in one film. Okay, and it came out 4 years after. They must have started shooting that like a year after it happened.
That's kind of crazy, actually.
How? 2006 it came out. Jeez. 5 years after it happened. They did not give it time to settle. Sorry, I'm going on. What? We're doing this weird rabbit hole right now. Okay. But
That's
yeah, I didn't
crazy.
know she buried in Leeds? Like, is there a like? Do people go and visit her grave?
Yeah, my dad went to visit and he sent me a picture. Because for anyone who doesn't know, I have, I think, 5 copies of the bell jar. And they're all different, okay? I have 2 illustrated ones which have different illustrations in them. They're not the same book. I have a hardcover that my mum got me in like a little gift box with a t-shirt and a pin, and I lost the pin. And it makes me so sad. Oh, she's buried in Heptonstall.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now.
Which I think is near Leeds.
Oh, people put little rocks on her grave. That's like cute, actually.
Yeah, it's outside of Leeds. That's where he went on a little. He visited my. He went over there with my uncle and stuff for a weekend, and he visited. I think I was invited to go, but I was like, yeah, as if. Because this was like a year or 2 ago, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah. I'd say it's closer to Manchester than it is to Leeds.
Yeah, it's one of those places where I don't know why she's buried there, because she died in London, but whatever.
Maybe it was saying something about her husband, so.
Oh, as usual.
Because was Ted Hughes from Yorkshire?
But people, they go pretty regularly, which is sweet.
Makes sense.
I mean, I don't know. I think if I got like mega famous as a writer, have I mentioned this? Okay, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. Okay, my plan is I'm gonna have a crypt. Okay, when I die. Sorry.
I think you've told me this, but yeah.
So I'm gonna have a crypt. It's gonna have kind of like a Roman vibe. So there's gonna be a big hole in the ceiling, and there's gonna be a tree planted over my body. And the tree is going to grow up through the hole in the roof. And then you can go into the crypt and you'll see my favourite books in little display boxes around the building. And I'll put like my pet's ashes and stuff in there as well. I'll put like, my favourite films and stuff. So it's going to be like a little kind of like a museum to my life. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to do that, but also if I get rich enough, I'll do it. And if I die and you're listening to this podcast and I'm like super famous and you love my books, please bring me either yellow tulips or pink carnations. Thank you very much. You can put those on my grave around the tree. That's the plan. That's what I want. Important. It's quite expensive, but I just want like a little museum to my stuff, because I love, like the Viking burials where you'd have your stuff, and like the Egyptians, and how they would have big tombs filled with all their favourite things and money and whatnot. I love that. I love the idea that my spirit, if ghost stuff is real, like if I became a ghost, I love the idea that I would be able to just sort of chill in like basically like a safe space. And that's what I want my crypt to be. I've thought about this a lot. I don't know if you can tell from the fact that I've got a whole plan.
Yeah.
Because I've always wanted to be buried so that a tree could use my nutrients to grow. So it makes sense that I would plant a tree on top of my grave, and it makes sense that I would have a crypt so that my favourite belongings wouldn't be buried and getting dirty in the earth. I just think that's kind of sweet. And I don't know if it's legal to do that. I think there is definitely laws, I guess, about burying you with 1 million possessions. But I just want my favourite things around me. I want people to be able to go and visit me and know who I was as a person, the way that I wanted to be presented. And I think that especially like when you think about like your family, it'd be kind of sweet to think that your family could go and visit you and make it something a little bit less depressing. And my dad has said my mum wants her ashes spread, I think. My dad is like, oh, you can bury me, you can put my ashes in the garden or something, and I'm like, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. He was like, you put my ashes in like the garden and I'll watch over you, and I was like, that sounds like a nightmare to me, thank you. I actually don't want that at all.
I mean, I suppose that's if you believe in the paranormal and things like that.
Thing is, I don't know. I believe in like spiritual stuff. I think if I was to describe my religion, it would be pagan, but I don't know if I believe in ghosts. Like, I'm not against the thought of ghosts, but when it comes to, like, me being a ghost, I'm not willing to risk it,
I think It depends. We'll never know, will we? I guess.
Because look, I don't believe in hell, and if it turns out that hell's real and I'm going there, I'm going there,
Oh,
right?
I'm definitely going there if it's real, but I
Yeah,
don't think it is. I
like I'm
think that's
never
just a
not
man-made
going
belief.
if it's real, so I don't care to think about that. But when it comes to like ghosts, if ghosts are real and I'm to become one, I want my burial place to be somewhere that I feel safe. I want my death place. Obviously, you can't really control that, but like I don't think I'd ever go into a care home if I had the choice, because I would want to die in my own home, sort of thing. Sorry if that inconveniences people, but actually, no, I'm not.
Well, do
And
you know, I saw an article, right?
yeah.
This guy, he was a World War II veteran. He was 106 and he still lived by himself. And he got the bus to the shop. It was like Asda every day. And he's the oldest man in Wales. Like, there you go. So you can be
Did you
independent.
see those
So you should be
nuns?
fine.
Those
Nuns?
nuns who they were in like a care home and they left, they like ran away to the monastery that got closed down so that they would keep running this monastery that they had lived in, because they were like, look, if we're going to die, we're going to die in the house of God.
Well, yeah, I don't blame them
Like,
if
good
that's
for
where
them.
they've been their entire. Yeah, if that's what they believe in and that's what the feelings them comfort, let them do what they want. Like, they're not hurting anybody.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. Like, if you want to practice your religion in peace, like, let them. They're not hurting anybody.
Exactly. And to tie this all back to the book, I think that the book deals a lot with the idea of autonomy. She is kind of forced into the first shock therapy. Do you know what I'm going to say? I'm just going to get my copy. 1 second. Because I think about this a lot, because I'm not normal. If my favourite book being a book about a woman who tries to kill herself isn't, like, obvious. Yeah. So the first line of the book is, it was a queer, sultry summer, the summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I didn't know what I was doing in New York. I'm stupid about executions. The idea of being electrocuted makes me sick, and that's all there was to read about in the papers. Goggle-eyed headlines staring up at me on every street corner and at the fusty, peanut-smelling mouth of every subway. It had nothing to do with me, but I couldn't help wondering what it would be like, being burned alive all along your nerves. She gets electrocuted. That is like her bad experience. The opening of the book, the whole paragraph, the first line, is about how she hates the idea of being electrocuted and how she has a morbid curiosity about it. And then she literally gets electrocuted, and the first time is a horrible experience and she hates it and it makes her feel awful and tingly, and she's like, I hated that, and she gets put off of it, and that's what leads her to like killing herself, trying to kill herself, is that she's like, well, there's no hope for me because this is the treatment and I don't want to do that ever again. She like refuses. And so she ends up being forced into care because she's hospitalized. And one thing that she does is she looks into a mirror and she sees her face, because for anyone who doesn't know, as I said, this is spoiler heavy, she uses pills, and so she gets very swollen because her body obviously reacts to this method and stuff. And so she doesn't recognize herself in the mirror, and it's like startlingly ugly. And she has a moment where she looks into herself and she's like, who is that? And she's like, oh, it's me. And it's like really weird. I feel like the levels of detachment that she goes through, the representation of it is brilliant, especially when it comes to the opening line of the book being about how she's talking without the foresight. Obviously the author has the foresight. It's like very important. She did choose to do this on purpose. But the first line is about electrocution. She then has a shock. And then it's the shocking stuff, like the shocks, that end up saving her when they're done correctly. And she has to be reassured, and she's like, look, it will not be the way that it was last time. The nurse actually cares about her and is like, look, you weren't treated well last time. I accept that, but that's not how it's going to be. She kind of reclaims her autonomy through having sex with that random man because she wants to even the scales between her and the men of the world. She goes out to see Buddy Willard, and he's like basically just a complete mess. He's dying, essentially. And he's dying, and she realizes how pathetic he is, and she feels less stupid about the way that she was when she was a girl, because he really wasn't as powerful as she thought he was. All of these things, these different threads, I think that they're quite important. I get why you would maybe be bored by them, because as well, you're not a super literary reader. We've discussed that before. I think it's valid that you would want like the plot, which is like the mental health stuff, to get kicked in. I get that, fully understand. But
Yeah, like I've got a background into it because I know how to do it. It's just sometimes I like to switch my brain off, but I will still be critical of other things. I think because it's like I said, because it's autobiographical, it's I'm just being my background. It's just difficult, I guess.
it's
So
hard to be
yeah.
harsh because like it's a real woman's experience that she lived in, and I get that. I just think for me the thing that gets me is that you read that first line and you don't necessarily know what you're getting into, and then you read it like a second time. And I actually have a copy that I'm annotating, and I stopped annotating it because I was not well enough to annotate. But like, I could write a whole essay about this book, and it would be like super long. It would be like thousands of words, because I just feel like there
Mm-hmm.
were a lot of choices that were very intentional. Because obviously she is being introspective about a time in her life. You know, this was published posthumously. She died. She killed herself.
3 months after, was it?
Yeah, like it wasn't written under her original name originally, and then she died, and it was. And I just think that there's something about the way that she switches up, you know, this like sort of introspective first line about how this all took place during a time when she was hearing about electrocutions and she was feeling really awful about it. Her slowly sort of progressing through, you know, this like social life that she's supposed to be enjoying but she's hating, and it gets into like the mental health stuff. And again, I get why you wouldn't enjoy, because I know you, why you wouldn't enjoy the other stuff so much, but from like an analysis perspective, I do think that it's really important, and I do think that everything that takes place in the book, every like line is super intentional, and it happens. I mean, yeah, the racism's not so intentional, but it's just because she was racist. But
Simple as.
yeah, I think that the bit about her being in a hospital working as like, I think like a candy striper would be the word. You know, she messes up and she doesn't understand other people. It's got that very clear like, this is a woman who has always been mentally different, and it's just now starting to really hit her, and she doesn't know how to deal with it. And I think all of these like little things, they're quite interesting, and it's like satirical, right? Like it talks about like high society. She is not necessarily the wealthiest person in the world. She gets rejected for a writing program. She decides that she's going to take this as a time to write her book. I actually did that. When I was unwell, I decided to write a book, and I did it. She can't write. She stops being able to read even. And it feels like everything happens for a reason. And from my perspective, reading this, like again, I didn't think I was gonna like it. I think it's just really interesting to see the way in which this character goes through the world, and she is impacted by all of these things that have no impact on her necessarily at the time. But then years later, when she's, you know, hospitalized, institutionalized for her mental health, it all like it shows how this stuff that might not have had any impact on most people went on to be the reason behind her going out and having a one night stand, on her being angry at that man and making him pay the hospital bill, why it makes him, you know, this person that she just does not care about, why she goes and visits this guy and is just like, oh, you're really pathetic. Like, her perspective on everything is influenced by the events that happen in the book, even if they seem irrelevant. And I think, again, I get why, from a reading perspective, they might be boring, but as somebody who read this with, like, the idea of challenging myself as a reader, and, like, reading classics and stuff, and, like, trying to become more mature in my reading, it was one of those books that really showed me how you can analyse a book, and how all of these, like, things matter. And you know, that's like why I love it so much, because I just think that like you read that first paragraph and I could just say a million things about it, and I just you know, it's got a lot of flaws, but I think that like you said, it's well written. Whatever else, it's not a bad book in like a technical sense. I don't know, I'm getting like really but it is like we're an hour in, and
I think for me, I don't really have a lot more to say on it. I think, like, I mean, I could gush about other books, but for me, it's just something that Yeah, I've read,
It's like
and
a
I could say I've read
historical
it.
sort of
Yeah.
artifact almost. Like there's a lot to say about it, but also
Meanwhile, it's the same age as my mum.
oh, it's older than my parents, I think.
Oh my God. When did it come out? 1963?
Yeah, so it's a
Yeah,
year
it's the same age
older.
as my mother.
I just think like that's kind of
Crazy.
yeah. I don't know. I think I have a lot to say about it, but without getting into it in like a super like pulling out each line, it's a little bit different, you know? Like I don't know. I think the thing is as well, it's like you said, like you don't know where you sit with it
I
because
still,
it's
yeah.
objectively it's a good book, but it's about whether or not you're going to enjoy it. And it's fine that
And
you
that's
didn't.
down, and that's, yeah, and that's what's down to. I enjoyed parts of it, and I think that's just what it's down to. It's whether you enjoy the book or not, isn't it, really?
It really is. I think like I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it because of the place where I was in at the time. It's one that I recommend, but I always recommend it with the like, you know, the warning. I would never recommend this
Hmm.
blind,
No, oh
because that
no,
would be
no, no.
stupid. Downright dangerous, actually. Yeah, I think that it's one of those books that you can say a lot about, but also it would be really boring to talk about it the way that it deserves to be talked about because I think it does work really well for like critical analysis rather than necessarily.
Hmm.
I think we've done all right. um,
Yes.
Next week's episode is
Gonna be a bit different.
talking about
Oh,
like
yeah.
what we'd like in sort of like readership. Um,
Oh, yeah, that'll be a fun
I'm gonna
episode.
say now one of mine's gonna be a book deal.
I mean, isn't that what everybody wants, though? Like, I mean, I know I'm indie
Yeah,
published, but I'd still love that book deal.
yeah. You wouldn't say no to a seven-figure deal at like HarperCollins or something.
Oh no, I wouldn't, but
But
that's
basically that
in my
it's like
dreams.
us talking about what we would love as writers,
Hmm.
and also stupid little things like if you want like a new keyboard, for example, it would be that. If you wanted like a book that you've heard really good things about, it could be that. Stuff that we as writers just want, basically.
Yes.
But with a bit of discussion about these things and maybe what we're doing to try and achieve them. But yeah, that'll be next week. Da, 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 da. And then the next one after that will be the new year, and it'll be the penultimate episode. So
Oh wow.
I know, but we have some pretty interesting videos coming up, and I say videos, episodes, and then we have a lot of the new year. We're gonna plan a whole season in advance of like really interesting, fun topics. So you know what to expect, but also anyway, thank you for listening.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bookish Rambles podcast. If you want to hear more from us,
Follow to get the next episode delivered straight onto your feed.